Hello and welcome to the Business Standard Morning Show. I'm Nazia Iqbal. Let's take a look at the stories for the day. Let's start the show with the Reserve Bank of India's latest rules on auto debit transactions that have caused disruption for banks, merchants, and card networks. Have you also been warned by your bank or subscription services that your recurring payments might not be honored from October 1st? Well, this is due to RBI's new rules on auto debit transactions. This report explains the new rules and how they impact you.
Starting today, every customer who makes use of recurring transactions using debit cards, credit cards, and UPI must undertake a one-time additional factor authentication for smooth auto-debit transactions. Failing this, payments to streaming services such as Netflix and YouTube Premium and music apps like Spotify will get cancelled. And if the recurring payment is above Rs 5,000, the cardholder must approve it with OTP-based authentication every time it is due for payment. Banks have been informing customers for some time now that their standing instructions or recurring payments will not be honored as they comply with RBI guidelines. Now, how do you register for e-mandate before your first transaction? If you want to opt for an e-mandate facility on a merchant website, you must authenticate the registration via OTP. The registration will be completed only after you furnish requisite information, including the validity period of the e-mandate and value of the recurring transaction. The new rules have been mandated by the Reserve Bank of India while keeping in mind the customer's convenience and safety during such recurring transactions. Banks are required to send a notification via SMS or email with details of the upcoming charge at least 24 hours before the transaction is set to take place, and another one after the transaction has taken place. You also get to change the mode of receiving these notifications. You will also have the freedom to opt out of a transaction or an e-mandate using a link that is provided in the SMS or email. All recurring transactions above Rs 5,000 will have to be approved separately every time. The RBI had originally set March 2021 as the deadline for complying with the new framework. After extending it by 6 months, it had warned of stringent supervisory action against banks and other players in the ecosystem for any further delay. There are some recurring transactions that won't be impacted by the new rules. Standing instruction for auto debit from a bank account and not a card for mutual fund SIPs, EMIs, and insurance premiums will see no change from today. Some lenders who are yet to comply with the new rules have advised customers to make direct payments for their standing instructions, as the old facility has been scrapped. While most major banks and card networks have complied or are in the process of complying, some disruptions can be expected as the new framework kicks in from today.
One of the world's largest institutional investors has locked horns with Reliance Industries over its appointment of the Saudi Aramco chairman as an independent director. It has raised questions over his independence at a time when Aramco is in talks to invest in Reliance Oil and Chemicals business. Let us take a look at the events that are unfolding and who is saying what.
Yasir Al Rumayyan, the chairman of Saudi oil producer Aramco and the governor of that country's sovereign wealth fund, was appointed an independent director on the board of Reliance Industries on July 19 for a period of 3 years. The appointment has now come up for shareholder vote and the voting process will end on October 19. Based on the recommendations of influential American proxy advisor company Glass Lewis, the California State Teachers Retirement System, CalSTRS, has decided to vote against Al Rumayyan's appointment. CalSTRS is the largest educator-only pension fund in the world and the second largest pension fund in the US, with about $318.4 billion worth of assets under management. As of June last year, CalSTRS held 5.3 million fully and partly paid shares of Reliance. This holding is valued at $179 million today. The fund has cited potential conflict of interest as Reliance plans to sell a 20% stake in its oils to chemical business for $15 billion to Aramco, where Al Rumayyan is the chairman. The deal was supposed to close by March 2020, but it got delayed. It is in its final stages at present. Given his connection with the Saudi government and the proposed business relationship with Reliance, proxy advisors Glass Lewis said it did not consider Al Rumayyan as being independent at this time. In fact, it is not just Cal STRS which is opposed to the appointment. The Florida State Board of Administration, which manages $245 billion, is also against it. Further, Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund headed by Al Rumayyan has already invested $1.3 billion in Reliance Retail Ventures and $1.49 billion in Jio Platforms. Reliance Retail Ventures is a Reliance Industries subsidiary that owns the group's retail businesses, while Jio Platforms is Reliance Digital Services unit. In a communication to proxy advisors firms, Reliance strongly defended its move, saying Al Rumayyan's appointment had no connection with the proposed deal with Aramco. Further, the O2C business was being spun off into a subsidiary which might have nominees from Aramco. Reliance also said its Human Resources Nomination and Remuneration Committee, which had 4 independent directors in its total strength of 5, unanimously recommended his appointment, given his versatile experience. Now let's go to InGovern Research Services, Sriram Subramaniam and Vidhi Legal's Debanshu Mukherjee for their views on the issue.
Reliance Industries in any event has said that we'll have to see as to when the deal fructifies, that is the investment of Aramco into the O2C subsidiary. And 2 is they have also indicated that they are open to reviewing the categorization of the director at a later. Section 149 of the Companies Act is very specific in the definition of an independent director. From that perspective, the director being inducted onto the board of Reliance Industries would be termed as an independent director. We don't see a conflict of interest from the perspective of that definition.
On the face of it, and at least perceptually, it appears that there is a conflict and he's not independent. But technically, since Aramco doesn't have any direct investment in RIL, he appears to be independent. And RIL is also saying that Aramco investment will actually come in a subsidiary eventually, and not the company where he's being appointed. And therefore, there should be no question of a conflict. Now, technically, they might be right. If you look at the relevant provisions of the law, an independent director should have no pecuniary interest in the company where he's being appointed or a subsidiary. Now, the question here is, can investment by Aramco in a subsidiary, whenever it happens, disqualify him from being an independent director in the parent company? Well, they'll argue that he's not personally investing in the company. So, so it's Aramco which is investing. So there is no question of a conflict whatsoever. And the same logic applies to his connection with the group through the Sovereign Wealth Fund that is invested in some of the group companies here. Legalities aside, if you look at the bigger picture, one might argue that he appears to be more of a nominee director of an investor or a business partner. And typically a nominee director is not seen as an independent director. There is clearly a loophole here. There seems to be nothing in the law today to prevent such appointments from taking place. And as we know, independent directors enjoy better protections in terms of liabilities when things go wrong. And so this might be a good opportunity for the policymakers to reevaluate the existing legal framework and limit arbitrage opportunities of the sort that we are seeing now.
The Mukesh Ambani-led company has so far not addressed the concerns around Al Rumayyan's connection with the Public Investment Fund, which has investments in Reliance subsidiaries. Now, the question that remains is whether the investors will be satisfied with Reliance's justification, or will they force India's most valuable company to reverse the appointment of Al Rumayyan? Let's wait and see.
Equity markets have put up a strong showing in the first half of the current financial year. Though the broader markets have outperformed the benchmarks, their performance has been equally noteworthy. Analysts remain convinced that the bull run will continue for the rest of FY22. But will minnows manage to trump their larger peers this time around? Let's find out.
The stupendous rally in the first 6 months of 2021-22 met with a lackluster end, with the benchmark indices declining for a third straight day on Thursday. But they still managed to offer 20% returns to investors during this period, which saw the BSE Sensex rising from the 50,000 level to over 60,000 and the NSE Nifty from 14,700 to nearly 18,000. The markets not only withstood a strong second wave of COVID-19 during this period, but also held their ground amid talks of the US Fed tapering, the Evergrande crisis, and strong inflation fears. Against this backdrop, the show put up by the broader markets was even more noteworthy. The BSE Mid Cap Index surged 25%, while the BSE Small Cap rose by a whopping 36%. A major chunk of gains came from the realty, metals, media, and IT packs, which soared between 35 and 53% on the NSE. The auto, pharma, and banking sector's performance against this was muted, as they added between 7 and 16%. Now, can the equity bull run continue in the second half of FY22?
If you look at current level, markets are trading at around 20.8 times, 21 times FY23 earnings estimates, which of course is higher than historical average of around 18x. So valuation wise, we are on the higher side. However, what we also have to understand is that the economic recovery, we have a very strong economic recovery which is currently undergoing. So we expect that economic recovery process will continue from here on. So that is something which can drive earnings upgrade from here on. So if you look at the consensus estimates, people are talking about consensus estimates of around 730 to 735 rupees EPS estimates for the Nifty for FY22 and around 850 to 870 rupees kind of an earnings estimates for FY23. So given the very strong economic rebound which we've had from the lows of the second COVID wave, there is a possibility that these earnings might get upgraded.
In that scenario, would outperformance by broader markets last?
We believe that the valuation gap between Nifty and the mid and small caps have narrowed significantly. So from an overall basket, the Nifty mid cap index might not outperform the Nifty by a very large margin like it has done since the COVID lows. But within that, we believe that in the mid and small cap space is a very large space as compared to the large cap space, and there are plenty of names over there. So going forward, one will find enough bottom up ideas in the mid and small cap space, which will not only outperform the Nifty, but they will also outperform the mid cap and the small cap indices as such.
What are some of the key risks for the market this financial year?
One of the key risks is that the inflation, which has so far been thought to be transient in nature, that can prove to be more sticky in nature, and we can see inflationary pressures which are supposed to globally, which are supposed to come off starting from the beginning of next year. That might linger on for another couple of quarters till the time the supply chain issues are not resolved globally. The US Fed is talking about so far, probably if you go by the dot plots, the US Fed is talking about only one rate hike next year. In case inflation proves to be sort of more sticky in nature globally, the US Fed might be forced to do more than one rate hikes next year, and it can probably start immediately after the tapering process is over in June, July of next year. So in that case, we can actually see, so if the tightening process, so while markets are looking at a tightening happening, but if the tightening process is pulled forward or is much quicker than expected due to inflationary pressures not waning by the middle of next year, then that can prove to be a risk for the market next year. And of course, in the immediate future, of course, we have seen a lot of news coming out of China regarding the slowdown in the economy and problems in the real estate sector. The China issue is not a very large concern for the market as of now, but if the situation were to deteriorate and we see messy default of Evergrande, which can have a spillover on the entire Chinese property sector, so that can lead to some sort of a short-term volatility in the markets. And of course, the third key risk is if we have a pretty severe third COVID wave, which looks a bit unlikely at this point of time, going by the Sero survey results and the vaccination rates in India. So these, in a nutshell, are the three key risks for the equity markets as of this point.
Now, moving on to more immediate triggers at hand. The markets are likely to react to a host of macro numbers today. The August core sector output data came out last evening, while September market manufacturing PMI is due later today. Furthermore, auto stocks are likely to hog the limelight as the monthly auto sales figures start trickling in today. The action in the primary market will also remain strong. The IPO by Aditya Birla Sun Life AMC will open for the third and final day today. On Thursday, the issue sailed through with 1.07 times subscription. Lastly, shares of Paras Defense will list on the bourses. After a record-breaking performance in the IPO market, the company could attempt to stage a similar move with a blockbuster listing. In the grey market, Paras Defense was quoting at a 140% premium over its issue price of Rs 175.
Are you looking for other investment options because you are troubled about the low interest rates on bank deposit instruments? What if we told you that you could lend your money to someone and get a 9 to 12% interest rate on that loan? Appealing, right? Of course, there are some riders attached. Let's understand all about peer-to-peer lending.
Higher the risk, higher the return. Most modern investment instruments abide by this principle. As the world moves away from traditional financial institutions to look for alternatives offering better returns, several options are cropping up. We know about cryptocurrencies. Their stellar returns offset by high volatility in prices. Another such modern investment instrument is peer-to-peer or P2P lending. Imagine lending the money you typically park in fixed deposits or mutual funds and getting annual returns of 9 to 12% on the amount you lend. That's what the new age Indian fintech startups like Cred and BharatPe are aiming to do with their recently launched P2P lending products. Cred has launched a P2P platform called Cred Mint in partnership with RBI registered P2P non-banking financial company Liqui Loans. BharatPe will carry out P2P lending via an app called 12% Club. Such investment options obviously seem attractive at a time when interest rates on bank deposits are falling and are currently around 5 to 6% in India. For instance, State Bank of India barely pays 5.4% interest on its longest term deposit. For senior citizens, it is 6.2%. Here's how Cred and BharatPe make P2P work for their customers. The money lent on Cred Mint will be spread out among 200 plus borrowers on average. BharatPe will work on a similar model. It is important to know that P2P lending is a high-risk investment. It is an unsecured loan, so there is no guarantee put up by the borrower for the lender to redeem in case of a default. The borrowers are those with low credit scores who find it difficult to get loans elsewhere. The unsecured nature of the loan is the reason for high interest rates. Cred mitigates the possibility of a default by lending only to customers who have been using its Cred Cash product. The company says these are borrowers with high credit scores of above 750 and low default rates. Cred founder Kunal Shah said that Cred Cash had a loan book of Rs 2,415 crores with a default rate of less than 1%. Also, the company allows lenders to withdraw the amount either in full or partially anytime. They get the money along with the interest for the period invested within one working day. BharatPe also promises lenders anytime liquidity with zero withdrawal charges. Most P2P lending startups also allow lenders to handpick their borrowers after scrutinizing their credit scores. Now, P2P lending isn't new in India. In 2017, the RBI brought P2P lending within its purview, ensuring that only the serious ones with watertight business models remained in business. This was also the time when the P2P lending industry was unraveling in China, with high default rates and online lending platforms being investigated by the government there for malpractices. Besides Cred and BharatPe, some other players in the Indian P2P lending industry are Rupee Circle, Lend & Club, Finzi, and India Money Mart. As for some investment advice for a P2P lender, it is important to start small and scale up gradually. Lend & Club CEO Bhavin Patel advises first lending a sum of around Rs 25,000, then scaling it up to Rs 1 lakh to achieve an adequate level of diversification among borrowers. About the time period for investment, Patel suggests investing for 12 to 24 months as that is the minimum period his platform's optimization algorithm takes to produce decent results.
That's all we have for you today. We will be back tomorrow with more news and analysis in our next episode. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.